let us lay into it. The leading non-performance of those employees. This is the focus of chapter 15, is showing us responsibility that leaders need to be accountable workers, a consequence, reward for work well done, sanction for the work not well done, for example. Your book uses the Brian Dye, the accountable leader. These chapter discusses the role of leaders, the role that in those healthcare organizations when confronted with those non-performing workers, employee, positive aspect and opportunity for the defining the standard of the performance is a need in addressing those situations, addressing those to articulate and to encourage, to see and always have those non-performing employees in a positive light and look for the opportunity to coach for the nature of educating the mentor these employees. The non-performing employees and workers can be viewed as an opportunity to create and inspire a person, personnel loyalty, to create an organization loyalty. When all else has failed, rest assured the option, the consequences of risk management and determination may be necessary in the end. Leaders must reinforce the culture of the productivity and also the excellence of required in healthcare industry. So learn objective, you want to write this down for chapter 15. Number one, describe the importance of dealing with the non-performing and workers in the workplace. Number two, distinguish between the different types of non-performance of those workers in those organizations and in the healthcare environment. Number three, relate the progressive strategy for moving the non-performing employees towards more productivity, posture within those organizations, and predict the outcome of each strategy. Number four, diagram and those differentiation of the steps, that is, that progressive action from the initial of the recognition of the problem to terminate a worker. A leader should take the confronting non-performing employee should progress towards improvement of firing. Number five, summarizing the method of education or those education. Number six, evaluating the risk management issue associated with dismissing the employee or the worker or asking them to engage in the performance to improvement. Plans, that's it. Introduction, people are most important resource in healthcare industry, an organization industry. Human resource must be manageable and management must meet the needs of the organization. However, people are led. Human resource system provide the framework to manage, to be professional, who, what represent the people in the healthcare organization or companies, organization with that dedicated or high performers or workers or employees. No organization can be successful. A healthcare organization is only as good as the people who work there, as the people, including the leader, working and alongside these dedicated, autonomous, hard-working employees and workers. Be sincere pleasure for a leader, for any leader. But unfortunately, the opposite may be the true when leading the non-performing workers, employees. In addition, all of these and the other responsibility of leadership and the person in charge or seeks change to perform their duty, be no task, be difficult, be no working, that we have a non-performing worker. Employees, number one, let us consider some of the factuality that influence a non-performing opinion or non-performing. These are sometimes disturbing behavior between physician nurses can have a far-reaching consequences of the patient care. Remember that. A far-reaching consequences of the patient care. Second, retaining a counterparts or understanding workers who are serious, detrimental to those organizations. Three, as a test of the proposition of the non-performing workers, is a major leadership issue. We can challenge you, ask any leader who knows what it is, his or her top three leadership challenges may be or have to be. wherein this current past leadership, the task of this job that typically replies on the most leaders will be revolve around communication, of course, challenges of those communication, the healthcare industry, environment, and also it shows us difficulties of leading those non-performing leaders, employees, and workers, what to do about those workers at a keynote address to the University of Washington, D.C., the former Secretary of State, General Colin Powell. He suggested that is a leader a responsibility to lead only the that performing work employees and organization, but also the non-performing. He says workers. He stated that the entire organization will be watching. They be watching you, leaders, and how he or she leads those individuals. For the purpose of this chapter, we can classify these non-performing workers, employees, into two categories. You want to write this: unproductive employees and what employees who seeks to avoid work. Both types compose a variety of complexity challenges of leaders. Unfortunately, dealing with the non-performing workers. Unfortunately, that cannot delegate by the leaders to be subordinate. This is true most cases. It will always remain a personal responsibility of leaders and leader to remedy these issues, to remedy the concept of surrounding problems, surrounding contributing to those workplaces. In fact, this healthcare organization is a mission, situation mission that that shows process. Your book talks about the McGregor theory, showing the non-performing employees that will fall into the X category. We talked about this before. The unproductive workers, work employee, the unproductive system that may have lack or may or not be appropriate for motivation, may not be appropriate for the education need to maintain productivity in a workplace. These workers may be willing to perform work in these organizations, but however, they may not have enough structure, foundation, continuing education to actually do the work, do the task that is required. Workers, employees who were hired years ago have special skills, special talent that may find themselves working in a new design organization with new skills and technology and tools, ability are no longer relevant. For example, an employee or worker who is negligent in maintaining a currency with innovation technology, innovation in medical informatics, for example, may gradually begin to become less productive in the workplace. If they lack the currency result in an inability to complete the daily tasks, these are specifically aspects of the non-performing lack of work, knowledge, skills, ability, lack of training that we'll address later, maybe in this chapter or in the continued chapter. On the other end of this spectrum of this unproductivity, workers are those who may no longer inspired by the organization leadership policy, mission policy, performing diligently on the job and the task. Reflecting, your book uses a Hasbrook, the two-factor theory, intrinsic, extrinsic factors. Intrinsic, the worker may not be committed to the mission of healthcare organization and the mission of the business. As intrinsic, the worker employee may not be satisfied with the norms, the policy, the pay, the reward, the system. For instance, a worker who is accustomed to receiving praise, additional responsibility may be thought or may be asked on go to that person in those organizations under the supervision of one leader may become less productive. An organization that is supervised by a different leader, whose style may differ, his or her predecessor before, and other factors affect the reality of the worker becoming unproductive in the workplace. It will be incumbent upon the leadership on the discovery and the leadership style that these outcomes before trying to affect the change using the Hasbrook two-factor theory to identify the potential of the intrinsic and the extrinsic causes of a worker of lack motivation to perform a solid method, a solid work process to determine the causes of this catalyst that have led to the non-performing worker. Regardless of the cause or causation, the subpar of the performance, the leader needs to be aware of the employee who are unable to perform, unable to work in these organizations, unable to understand a continual basis the effective process of other employees and other staff within the new leadership business. For instance, other employees in the work unite may be forced to pick and choose a slack for an unproductive worker. These practices result in one or more workers, employee having to do more tasks just to maintain the organization effectiveness. Shouldering these extra burden for a long period, long time results in a high employee dissatisfaction with leadership, less effectiveness, remedy of this unproduction workers as well as lack of desire to continue to work in these organizations or that organization. Unfortunately, the strategy for improvement, behavior, outcomes of the unproductive worker generally sample and easy to implement in those organizations. Ultimately, if a worker continues to be unproductive, dismissal may be the resolution, a final solution in a healthcare leader that will move to stage a progressive action. Work avoidance of the employee, the second type of this non-performance of worker, is more troublesome. These workers are work avoiders, also known as malingerers, malingering around. Malingerers attempt to avoid the work within those organizations altogether, either for some personal reason or for a secondary gain, gainership. Malingerers are workers or employees who, whatever reason, no longer willing to perform the work in these organizations on a daily basis. They feel entitlement to continue to draw a paycheck from the healthcare organization without delivering requirements that are feeling entitlement. May not be nothing to do with employee current situation output contribution to the workplace. As a result, employees who adopt a work avoidance, malingering altitude towards a daily activity or work in an organization will affect the bottom line of the organization. Non-performing workers, employees such as these are similar to what they call the lock and part of the Hisco setting theory that's deemed the social loafer. This situation should be and will never be tolerated because it can create a new organization culture characterized by entitlement, low productivity. These negative organization culture may also lead to patient care errors, financial errors, fraud, you out of business error. The evidence of these leadership becoming weak in handling malingerers will ultimately create a destructive, a distrustful environment for all workers in the organization. Simple as that. The employees will eventually come to see the leader as an ineffective, easy, manipulated, frail. Some employees may abandon their personal goal of mission achievement or work in excellency in these workplace environments, allowing the misdiocity, apathy to run the rampant in these organizations. Unfortunately, these strategies for managing malingerers are some complexity and complex in consuming those who use managing unproductively with employees and workers. Both physicians and emotional and physically draining will be, however, is a leader responsibility, a leader only to high performance, leader only to these organizations, but also to the low performance. A responsibility is leadership that allows non-performing employees and workers to continue along with the path in these organizations. It's not doing his or her job as a leader by not laying out the law successful, building a team successfully, creating a positive workplace successfully. In these environments, leader must center a stage in improving the work in these non-performing settings. Dismissing these workers, dismissing these non-melingerers in health organizations, both of these options are most difficult in job performance and leadership performance, regardless of the industry you are in today. Which leader works is very important. Verbally, the communication, not dismissing those non-performing workers can invite an unpleasant, at minimum, can create a discomfort for not communicating in a formal relationship, tightly in the connection, professional organization, reporting to chains in a more complex situation. The non-performing workers or employee may retaliate, file a complaint with any member or members of organizations, either internal or external. The organization must understand the process in these cases. Leadership places both in those organizations him or herself in the position of professionalism, parallel to the appropriate documentation must need does not support verbal action. These can all follow in the lack of productivity of investigation of workers. Step initiated to solve the remedy, the lack of performance. Furthermore, not only important, even more troublesome if it's not followed. The result of the complaint filed against the leader by a worker for may view an incorrectly outside stockholder circumstance if it's not evidently reported. The inability to lead the people in the organization. As a result, leaders leader might be gun shy. Potential to those workers retaliation. The outcome may be inappropriate. Decision by a leader to do so nothing or to take a notice, to take property or to take action over these actions can avoid try to avoid employees rather than confront the poor behavior. In the worst case scenario, the step taken to deal with this non-performing employee worker may lead to a litigation, the unfortunate reality of defending against fruitless nuisance of workers' complaint. It's also often result in an organization expending significant financial leadership resource in response to these allegations. Thus, concurrently, these taking legitimate action against non-performing workers, the leader must ensure his or her actions are supported, are local with laws, senior leadership, internal policy. Leader that must also ensure that the process is thoroughly documented. All such much leader in important assessment of leadership to non-performing employee personnel. As with humans' endeavors, people may arise that hinder, block, eliminate health organization efforts to fulfill the goals and mission and reaching the vision that is already stated. People, employees, subordinate peers, sometimes supervisors may be the catalyst, the root of the problem. Even when the organization has a truly vetted hiring system, including a multi-level and multi-approach interviewing process. Some employees may not perform to the level of requirement that meets the standard of a healthcare organization. Sometimes organization all change creates a situation where employees can no longer perform to the level expected when workers are not performing up to expectation. It is the healthcare leader duty, responsibility to intervene to remedize this situation. Leadership intervention is a situation that takes courage, integrity, and communication, documentation, alignment with the organization value, mission, direction. These visions of strategies and goals and compassion for the non-performing employees. The leader at these closest level of the non-performance of those workers should be one that starts the process of intervention. Although senior leaders may play a role in the situation model, dictates their environment. Healthcare leaders who do not intervene with the non-performing are simply reinforcing, modeling behaviors that are odds with leadership, odds with the predetermined or of those organization mission, odds with the predetermined of the mission, vision, strategy, goals, odds with objective, the ultimate reaching goal, the culture, odds with the organization that thrives in the healthcare industry, as well as aspect of this leadership, the consistency of critical intervening and intervention of those non-performance. Given the two main categories we talked about, the non-performance of workers, the several approaches that needs may be taken to evaluate the non-performing, to evaluate the employees and workers. Three approaches your book talks about in those process of evaluating. Evaluating, you want to write this down. It discusses these first evaluation that lacks the employee commitment, that lacks important employee compliance or employee resistance to those organizations as norms, the standard we talked about, the policy and the procedure. These are examples of the loose coupling by the workers and employees, that by the loose requirement that needs tightened coupling. And these modality of workers, motivation of the critical. The second is evaluation of lack of knowledge. Knowledge, skills, ability to lack the competency of skills, the ability to create the non-performing, the non-performing situation with those workers. This can also incorporate the lack of required licenses, certification, education, training. The third, you want to write this down, evaluation that may address whether the worker or employee is inconsistent, unreliable, always late, commitment, compliance with the healthcare organization's norms, standards, policies, procedures, are the inconsistent in a job task performance. This is the worker that may not fit into the culture, may not fit into the organization. These situations are examples that link the direct to the model of the communication, the direct to the compliances, or maybe just the resistance of an individual personality that plays a major role in leadership and understanding of the worker, understanding of the employees. Something to think about as you write your discussion. The personality as construct can assist in the understanding of the individual worker. But people like to believe that there are behaviors insensible, irrational, opposed to foolishness and foolish irrational. The personality is complex and consistently evolving and adapting to the system of mental structure and mental process, such as the needs, wants, memories, self-image, the way in which the individual, the way we see ourselves, themselves, in relation to their environment, working with each other. A worker and employee personality changes over time to adapt to the situation and leadership, as well as his or her activity level. Developing the education and training, occupation trail, marital status, health, the social economics process and status, employee self-image is essential. The values and beliefs that season themselves, how they promptly portray the image of themselves, and how they properly portray the environment where they live, where they work, does remain relatively stable. However, for example, this can be a focus of achievement orientated person that will continue to seek success. A conscious person, a conscious person, continue to be reliable, aggressive person that continues to show combative, sometime over time, across situation. All these is different issues that you can show and read in your book that shows interest of those how leadership should promote, hire, sustaining workers who are able to adapt to change or changing situation that stay loyal to the organization mission, situation that stay loyal to the organization objective, performance, duties. Likewise, workers who are not able to adapt to change, the change management, have questions about loyalty, demonstrate marginal performance, not selected those check marks when you ask a question within those hiring process. Healthcare leader must foster hiring, reward, promotion, resources, subordinate and other workers who are adaptable, adapt to change those ally loyal and performing their duties as well. When leaders do not do less than the reward, do less than the credit, subordinate with organization allied completely a complementary support personality, then they are essential reinforcing the personality behavior that is portrayed. That might sometimes go against the organization direction, organization process, mission, organization leadership culture as a whole. So the reward for those subordinates who exhibit the personality, the mission, the behavior that we are looking for, who wants redirect those who do not meet your expectation. These simple facts is directly tied to the process of development of organization culture. Your book uses reference shrines as a primarily mechanism and leadership that presents methods to intervene the non-performance of workers in hopes of enhancing his or her performance. The values of these and the organization in efforts to get to the mission. The book also talks about retaliation, adaptation of norms to these organization standards. The healthcare marketplace is a highly competitive environment. Workers who demonstrate must have successful made through set of screening, made through set of criteria, set of education that must be processed and experienced and depict on the resume and later evaluate to those criteria based on performance, personal interviews, have demonstrated that our skills, needed skills, are competent when these applying for these jobs know the employer has any employee that is not pre knowledge or pre terminated within these concepts. Any questions so far? If you can hear me, I am now taking questions. I will go to the chat room. Good. And nice to see you join us today. So we're talking about chapter 15. Chapter 16 is a reading out of course. Chapter 15 talks about non-performance leadership, which is very important to our healthcare industry as we are nurses, as we are leaders in the administrators in the healthcare industry that expect expectation of norms, performance standard, the frequent communication that is needed. Not only need the verbal, the model, documented, written to understand this to the staff, employees across all spectrum of the healthcare. Nevertheless, the non-performing, so you want to write that down, the non-performing worker, employees may need explicit counseling for each expectation of norms, performance standard, as in a transformation of leadership, individualized, considering and also an intellectual stimulation of the key consideration when dealing with the non-performant. The leader must express how the non-performing individual worker fits into the scheme of these organizations, meshing within his organization mission, meshing with his organization vision, strategy, meshing with the goals. Many times in an organization, the change result is need to become more organizational, effective, cause conscious, in a situation of leadership that may change the requirement, that might change the compliances using policy, procedure, for example. The requirement to be consistent, the requirement to be compliant with the organization mission and policy, the standards, the norms can be explained in terms of construct called organization coupling. I'm gonna write that down. Both loose coupling possible along many degrees and between when tighter needed in this organization of coupling becomes a new norms. Some workers, some employee may find it difficult to adapt to this new culture, this new coupling. The strength of the communication and feedback loops determines the organization, determine the stronghold of the coupling that is backed by the loops of the tighter coupling, whereas the weaker loop suggests to loose coupling. Your book talks about that, uses Jekyll and Lederer that suggests the four category. So you want to write that down, to determine the coupling status in these organizations. Gentler and uses number one, formal rules, the form closing and following tighter coupling. Number two, agreeing the rules, the greater for those employee with the rules, making those rules tighter in the coupling. Number three, the feedbacks, closer and closer feedback, understanding timing, tighter coupling, he calls it. Number four, attention, to empower an individual, to allocate the energy, to allocate the time, to prioritize these areas, to prioritize the competency, the empowerment, to foster the focus of attention to the areas of the responsibility and needs, to meet the organization norms, especially in the compliances with the policy, especially in these healthcare industry, especially to facilitate the frequent norms, the frequent standard, oriented with those communication with the non-performing worker, to reinforce the new norm, rewarding those non-performance, rewarding their performance too, workers, showing the compliance with the norms and also punishment that is needed for those workers of non-performing compliances. Both part of leadership, both part of duty of reinforcing the leadership, both part of solidifying the organization norms. Leaders should be aware that the creep into this non-performance may not always be intention readily evident to those workers or readily under those discussion. An employee who has always managed the medical records, for example, the same way for years and years and years, may be unaware of the new compliance and regulation, the governing body, the governing of this disposition of records. In a similar fashion, the worker who has worked for several years in an environment where the subtle errors, internal memos of the spreadsheets were tolerated, may find him or herself odds with the new leadership, odds with the process, who has a higher standard for the same information, same technique, but just higher standard in leadership, given the opportunity to a possible uh, less motivated positive aspect of communicating communicating standards and negative aspect. For example, workers who turns into a flawless report without spelling or math check and errors should be publicly praised or not. Awareness of these benchmarks are very important. Example of standards that should be readily available to all. To all process of the staff, employees, an example how the organization should move. Artifact that may be used to model these organization sample. The practice that holds and helps these re-emphasize the leadership performance expectations of other workers without singling out the non-compliance. These are very important in the organization. The book calls it the passive role modeling, the passive role approach model that may not work for employees who may not, who are tightly welded with their workplace habit. Such situation will be incumbent upon the leader to call workers, employee, for positive change, positive reassuring, positive coaching, mentoring, discussion in these workplaces. Setting the standards, clearly presenting the stimulus with the workers. Efforts in meeting those standards, efforts in meeting those compliances. The employee effort should be praised. Employees should be made to feel reassured, special, valued. These approaches critical in the process of those retaliation non-performing workers. A leader comes across strong and not a critical manner and friendly. Not only loses loyalty, uh, loses the loyalty of those performing. They continue to work together. That may also create a perceived environment. That's what I'm talking about. The intolerance in which workers who are not contributing, taking a risk, engaging those risks in those organizations, citizenship, behavior, all of these are carefully not only balanced, but must be trained, educated, experienced leaders who become more comfortable, proactive, and strategy, the ideal outcomes. These are all employee understanding of leadership, vision, and those embracing those his or her own vision. The choice of whether to document these types of informal or verbal coaching, a verbal session would be an individual decision, of course, made by leaders. But the workers will reflect those conversations. Workers will reflect improvement, the efforts towards meeting, towards discussion in these organizations. These verbal, unrecorded, unwritten exchanges may be the only action necessary. Sometimes, however, it should be subsequently with the conversation they need to place regarding similar action with a brief writing process, time spent leading with adopting the strategy, following up this conversation, for example, with friendly, non-threatening. These are all notes, emails, another document. It could be another conversation of documentation. Items discussed in these values, the steps that will become more very importantly only if leader believes that they or their workers will not take a positive, sometimes positive step to improve these performances. Also begins the process of documentation, if that is the belief, to protect the organization, to protect the level of process for these non-performing workers. So strategy coaching, your book talks about peer mentoring, your book talks about education for the non-performing. All of these are steps towards a positive change in educating the non-performing worker and educating the process of method, the process of transforming the worker into a performer. These techniques have varying levels of time commitment, have various levels of formality associated with the potentiality of different outcomes. For these examples I've given, coaching is really a central function that facilitates change, development. Education is another one. Coaching is a context of the non-performing. A non-performing employee that instructs, showing guideline, correcting, changing, challenging, changing employees to the performance of those expectations that is in need of the mission. Coaching leadership is a continual process in these healthcare field, daily healthcare, going beyond this accomplishment, constant process of improving the task, accomplishing through encouraging the value workers. Coaching involves the evaluation of those workers, employees, staying current, effort, motivation. All these are focused him or her to achieve the greater outcome for the business organization. Subsequent to projects, installing, instilling a sense of pride of those commitment in those organizations. Leaders should constantly be seek coaching as the number one opportunity, a daily opportunity, an activity or work. These techniques can range from a simple visit to a worker station, discussing how's your day, how's your family, showing a personality, a personal level, sharing his or her experience, doing similar projects, not just out you getting your hands dirty because you're a part of a team that you can do the work too, removing yourself from higher hierarchy, but coming in as a direct coaching that can show a step by step within the organization. Leader must be able, aware of activities that are responsible for the people to engage under their supervision. Coaching, like leading itself, cannot be delegated. You can't have your supervisor do it because that's not leadership. The perhaps impossible in most cases to coach someone via email, for example, via phone call. Leadership coaching must be there often, face to face. Your book talks about face to face reality doing the business in a model healthcare organization. However, these coaching techniques can also take place with groups, individual groups, in a larger group session, addressing the common points of productivity of all employees, of all workers. Coaches is based on transformation, a transformation leadership, a construct transformation leadership, such that individualized consideration, intellectual stimulation, performance of these expectations for workers, personal, face-to-face frequency, plan action that are necessary to be coaching in a professional sense, the usual specific for a set activity, work process, utilization with specific time and period, mentoring in a similar fashion, slightly different role than coaching. Mentoring tends to be broader scope, career orientated rather than specific activity, projects, tools, utilization of requires time and commitment. Compared to coaching, mentoring, leader action and behavior using coaching are often similar to those mentoring. Mentoring, your book talks about to those focused in a non-performant worker can be frustrating to the worker, frustrating to the leadership that may see mentoring as a target behavior. I know you've had this in your workplace. He or she being singled out, unfamiliar. The non-performing employee may not look or be favorable to the leader. The increased attention. Nevertheless, mentoring non-performing workers or employee should be considered one of the many leadership options. That is all that should be available in improving performance. Professional mentoring usually requires a longer commitment, several months to years sometimes, so it can result in a professional relationship. Mentoring is a practice of coaching coupled, coupled with instructions of, of elements of professionalism, while securing increasingly challenging opportunities for the mentee or mentor. Healthcare leaders are inherently coaches. That's what you are. You're inherently mentors. Both roles double differently, perform differently, improve the future career of employees and workers, and the organization outlook of these organizations as a whole depends on both roles. Also, the future oriented system modeling these embedded transformation is embedded in the characteristic of a transformation leadership, coaching, mentoring, complementing leadership, individual leadership. Your book uses Hudson as a suggestion, showing coaches and mentors follow these guidelines. So you want to write these guidelines down. The model mastery of professional areas of others to obtain guided models of others performing emerging scenarios, for example, advocating a critical and extending a corporate to those organization culture. Includes culture that of change, wisdom, endorses and sponsor others without using the needing to use the power, having control of the facilitated professional development within those organization system, developing organization system. These are recommended team coaching style, coach and mentor, in which coach facilitates communication, conducts long-range plans, supports the career of development of a team of a member, mediates or resolve the conflicts, measures and perform in a way a peer mentoring. A peer mentoring differs from mentoring several important C's. Peer mentoring occurs when information between the two peers is freely shared without leader supervision, intervention. Peer mentoring can result in a several positive benefits to the organization. Those who participate these benefits include opportunities, opportunity leaders who develop maybe at lower level in those organizations. Opportunities for employees to improve also in call gate relationship with one another, increase overall organization, increase efficiency, effectiveness, and a conflict of managing of non-performing worker, and the process of employee peer mentoring that provides a semi-formal process of aligning a well performing subordinate, and not with a non-performing marginal performing employee. Many of the same coaching and mentoring we mentioned, the concept I've mentioned, apply by role modeling, applied by knowledge of skills, applied by the abilities to transfer in the process of workplace, the process environmental workplace, are especially profound in this context. Many employees label their peer mentoring on the job training, although it is training on the job, also entails a purposeful matching of excellent performer with a lower performer. The peer mentoring is an effective way to facilitate creation of sharing, creation of knowledge through a intentional linking of high performance. Low performance can then be raised to a level of that peer mentor, a level to the honor, the tradition of those organization and leadership. Successful organizations have found ways to promote this concept, to promote this leverage of behavior for centuries. One such example can be found in the Wilson Company. Your book uses employee handbook from the 1919. The workers handbook states older employees can do single service by giving new employees the benefit of their experience. Appoint yourself as a community of one, a community employee of those departments. Point yourself towards those who knows. You may also be sure that those efforts will be appreciated. This handbook really simulated the time of the 1900s, showing those examples. Although these examples specifically addresses the new employees, as the same philosophy can be applied to the non-performing. Very important things you can use in your discussion. Moral showing us modern era. It will be wonderful if all workers in the healthcare organization were so conscious and forward thinking, for example, thinking about leadership, thinking about process, thinking about non-performing, thinking about whole circle 360, that 360 process that all within their walls. Peer mentoring could show an obligation of employment entity of truly uniqueness. In these cases where philosophy or philosophical process exists, the evidence of non-performing employee in these organizations, it is not only needed, likely, it may be the incumbent that suffers the high risk of performance or the non-risk of non-performing. The method shows a valuable point of improving performance, improving the method. It serves the three purposes your book talks about. So you want to write this down. It's leaders who are free or focused on time, attention, priority, and interests of the organization. Number two, provides opportunity for the leadership to develop the junior employees Number three, improves organization effectiveness. Good leader leverages resources available to the team when needed, as needed. If you are able to leverage your own employees, the task of improving the non-performance, the task of performance goes up. Education and training is a must. The formal objective, the base of these instructive, explicit of learning, the objective of detailed expectation, the mastery of knowledge and skills, abilities, behaviors. Education is a formal process, such as path followed while earning a degree. In contrast to training, usually a workplace needs these activities, both education and training. It's only enhances the knowledge and skills of non-performing work. Education and training can also be positive influence of those behaviors, altitudes to a sum of a degree of values or beliefs. The longer the learning time, the more the potential, the impact, the effort will be have for those workers and employees. No industry in the United States under more scrutiny of terms of needs of continuing education than the health field profession. These are some of the highest degrees now professional, physician, MD. These are management levels, leadership level. General workers, healthcare organization must understand the probability of these consensus of annual basis of training and leadership. So the performance, the training, opportunity for workers, employees are given in a critical fashion. So avoids non-performing and enhances the bottom cycle, revenue cycle of organization, enhances the culture and vision of leadership. So as I close the day in this chapter, leader must be cognizant, vital in the survival of the organization in healthcare. Education is not only a must, but it begins the basic orientation in the healthcare industry. Being hired as ideal to continue throughout these tenure in this organization. Healthcare organization cannot be recognized as high performance unless it has a continuous ensurement of training, education, process to enables to update the skills in the medical field. I want to thank you for watching today, visiting this course.